Welcome back. I'm Mark Thompson, and it is a pleasure to have you back and a pleasure to have Mike McGee join us. Mike is dedicated to kids, to the future. You know, he is somebody who has built an organization called Chiefs for Change, and they're dedicated to, as I say, building an education and a rich future for a lot of kids who otherwise might not have it. So, Mike, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks so much.
You can probably fill out a lot of the details. That's sort of the broad strokes on Chiefs for Change, but it is, I think, primarily focused in those areas, isn't it?
It is. We have just about 36 members who are urban school superintendents and chiefs of state education departments around the country. Collectively, they serve about 7.5 million students. And it is really one of the most diverse coalitions of education leaders in the country in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of the political context in which they serve. So it's given us a very good window into what everyone's dealing with right now.
Yeah, we feature a lot of political viewpoints that seem to lean progressive, of course, on TYT. But one of the things about your world is that you hear a lot about this, bridge the gap and, coalitions and political coalitions, but you really do that on some level. It seems as though yours is a bipartisan effort.
We try to. One of the things we feel like is that if we can bring this community of education leaders together around a core set of beliefs about what needs to be true and what needs to change to serve every kid in America well, then our advocacy at the state level, at the federal level, is going to be that much more compelling. And we have been able to do that, including in this time. I think our members are aligned around a vision for true equitable access to learning, even in the midst of this crisis.
You say that. I struggle to find evidence of that. I struggle to find access that underserved communities have to education. The whole idea of, I'll homeschool my kids, or we'll be in a virtual classroom, when a lot of homes don't even have access to the internet or whatever. I just use that as an example. You really know these underserved communities. It just seems as though that's an ongoing challenge that's underappreciated as a challenge.
It's an enormous challenge. And I think many of the urban school districts that our leaders serve have made great headway over the last few years in serving all of their students equitably and serving them well. But this has been an enormous disruption. And I'll give you a couple good examples. In a district like San Antonio, Texas, where the vast majority of the students are low income, where the majority of the students are Spanish-speaking students, they recognized that having a real digital divide in their schools was an inequitable situation, and they didn't realize this in February when kids had to learn from home. They realized it 3 years ago. So they began 3 years ago working to close that digital divide, getting Chromebooks to every one of their students, getting Wi-Fi in every home. And over the last 3 years had made a lot of headway. They hadn't finished the job. And so when everyone had to shift to distance learning, they still had about a third of their students who were not connected to the internet at home. And they needed to get Chromebooks to about 5,000 students across the district. So they jumped on that. They spent $7 million to try to rapidly finish the job there. And it has made a difference in the lives of those students. Another area that we found has been key to equity over the last few years, and has been even more important now, is making sure that curriculum across your system is of very high quality and teachers are well supported to use the best instructional materials effectively. Because what we find across the country is the students who are most likely to not have access to high quality curriculum that's rich and engaging and culturally relevant to them are low-income and historically disadvantaged students. In districts that have had their act together on curriculum during this time, and where teachers have been working together, well supported by the district on good materials, we've found that they've been able to shift to the online environment more easily and more equitably. And that's been encouraging. But there are still enormous inequities that even our members are dealing with.
That's fascinating, though. I have never heard until this moment curriculum mentioned in that way as such a critical element, and it sounds like it's a critical element in the way you describe it.
It absolutely is. One of the things that we've found, and there have been reports on this recently, including a report called The Opportunity Myth, is that low-income students and students of color are much more likely, regardless of their aptitude, to be given materials below their grade level. And not only below their grade level, but materials that are not culturally relevant to them, not engaging to them.
Were you on a call? I thought I saw something about you being on a call, a conference call type situation with the vice president. I'm talking about the current vice president, with Betsy DeVos, I think a number of other leaders. It was a collection of people that I might not have necessarily thought you'd be naturally engaging with, but apparently those are the people you naturally engage with.
It was, our members, as I mentioned, have extensive reach. They serve millions of students, and the White House and the Department of Education, do have a real interest in our thinking around K-12 policy. So I was invited to that call with the vice president and the secretary, and I welcomed being involved in that because there are some issues of federal policy right now that are critical to the lives of students. The main one being the role that the federal government can play in getting all students connected to the internet. There's a program that's run by the FCC called E-Rate. It provides federal dollars for school districts to buy equipment for students, things like laptops, even Wi-Fi hotspots for their homes.
That's right. Ajit Pai was on that call. I remember the FCC commissioner was on that call with you, wasn't he?
I don't believe the commissioner was on the call, but it was the topic that I wanted to discuss and had a chance to discuss. And I'll just say one thing specifically for folks out there. Anyone listening really can advocate on this and make a difference. There are federal dollars for the kind of devices and connectivity that students need right now. The FCC rules say that schools and libraries can use this E-Rate money to purchase those devices, but they cannot lend them out to students to use in their homes. It really is a set of regulations from a bygone era. And so that's a change that could happen quite rapidly. If they did that, it would really empower local public schools and public libraries to help out their communities right now. So we've been advocating for that and are still hopeful that that change is going to get made.
Of course, that seems like something that. What's required to make that happen? Is that literally a legislative process that has to seek that end, or is there any other way to make it happen more quickly?
My understanding is the FCC can do it, and then that would put Congress in a position to provide additional funding for that E-Rate program and really be problem solvers on this front.
Let me ask you, without getting too much into the weeds, where are you on charter schools and what seems to me to be an increasing emphasis on the privatization of education, which I think just widens the disparity. But again, you're the expert, not me.
So we're a little unique in that our members all lead traditional public school systems, but many of them have very successful partnerships with public charter schools. They've been able to make those relationships work and used their charter school sector as a sort of an innovation partner to explore new ways of delivering education well and delivering it equitably, with an eye towards bringing those practices back into traditional systems. So we've certainly seen that work well. We also believe that while there are many, many reasons to put your time and energy and resources into traditional public school systems, which is where our members are, there are real challenges in districts that are zoned for neighborhood schools, but in places that are redlined based on their history of segregation. So in a district like San Antonio, for instance, which I mentioned earlier, over several decades, the middle-class neighborhoods of San Antonio, the largely white neighborhoods of San Antonio, left the school district. And what you have now is a school district sort of shaped like a salamander. that is a real challenge in terms of funding and in terms of delivering other resources for kids and families. So we've seen smart ways to provide some amount of school choice to families for a number of reasons, including school integration, sometimes in partnership with charter schools, and sometimes in just by doing that with your own innovative traditional public schools.
So it's not either or. That's interesting to hear you say that. There can really be a partnership or at least an awareness of what's going on.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Mike McGee, what a pleasure to meet you. Congratulations on your work. We have, I think, the website up, and of course, it's Chiefs for Change. You can always get a hold of Mike at McGee Jr. on Twitter, at McGee Jr.
And MC McGee Jr., that's my Twitter handle, and would love the follows.
Yes, MC McGee Jr. Thank you. You corrected it. It's corrected it well. MC McGee Jr.
I've been doing weekly updates. I'm going to do one tonight from the calls that we have with all our members about how they're dealing with the crisis. I kind of give a long Twitter thread about what their latest thinking is. So that's a good place to find that information.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.